attendance on Zoom. And Carolina, please let me know when we're live on YouTube. I'll wait for your confirmation before we get started.
Okay, I just sent it to live stream. And we are live.
Sounds good. We are running ahead of schedule, so we have a little bit of time to figure out this tech. So thank you for your patience. Okay, let's double check that we're live. Okay, we're live. Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm the Executive Director of the Public Design Commission, and welcome. If you're joining us via Zoom and would like to testify, please sign up through the Google form link and also linked on the meeting agenda. For the public hearing, please note that we're reviewing the design of the amphitheater only, and testimony should be related to the amphitheater and not the park design, which was already approved. If you're here to testify in person, you can sign up on the sheet in the hallway. But I will hand it off to Phil, who will take us to the next step.
Good morning. My name is Phil Ahrens, Acting President of the Public Design Commission. Please note that Commissioner Morgenthau is observing via Zoom, and she will not be deliberating or voting in today's meeting. We'll begin the committee meeting with a conceptual review of the construction of the operations facility, Rockaway Operational Headquarters, Auburn, Queens. We will not hear public testimony or vote on this project. When you're ready, please begin.
Good to see everybody this morning. My name is John Fontillis. I'm a principal with the architectural firm H3. Actually, am I coming through okay in terms of the, okay. Today joining with me, obviously, you know, Nancy Prince and Sheena Brown with Parks. We also have Rodolfo Layton, Michaela Metcalf, and Debbie Vandermark from DDC as well. And I believe Julie Fisher is on her way. I'm here to talk to you about the reconstruction of the Rockaway Operational Headquarters in Auburn, Queens for the Parks Department. This is one of the first projects issued under the new DDC Design Build program. Go to the next. Oh, that's me. Thank you. The site is on the eastern end of the Rockaway Peninsula, just east of the A-train trestle. You can see here, here's our site. And then obviously here, the Rockaway Peninsula in all of New York City. It's also located about a third of a mile from the beach. The nearest subway station is the Beach 67th Street station, about half mile away, and is located near the Vernum and Barbados basins off Jamaica Bay, two inlets that are separated by the Terrapin Peninsula, which is a proposed preserve that Parks has in planning for the future. Well, thank you. The existing building is a one-story brick building located at the north end of the 1.25 acre site. The building was heavily damaged during Superstorm Sandy. 10 feet of floodwater came through the building, destroying a lot of the operational capability of the building. 80-mile-per-hour winds were prevalent on the site. As you know, about 1,000 structures in the Rockaway area were destroyed during that time period in 2012. But even after all that devastation, This site was critical to the recovery of the Rockaways because parks personnel and staff members and volunteers from the neighborhood actually used the dark hulk of the building with no utilities to maintain and mount recovery efforts from Rockaway Beach, from Breezy Point, all the way to Broad Channel. So this site is very special in terms of its location, being proximate to all the different parks facilities around the area, as well as being central to a lot of parks activities in southeastern Queens. Well, next. Most of the site is an open yard for parks vehicles. However, the facility is not open to the public. It's primarily a maintenance operations facility. Most of the staff personnel from parks going out to the beach areas, about 120, 130 of them will check in during the summer high point, but then during the winter time, the people on site will be dropped down to about 30 park staffers in total. As you see, most of the area is paved. The neighborhood is a wide variety of different commercial, residential, industrial uses. On the corner of Amstel Boulevard and Beach 74th Street is a one-story church, a community church in an old warehouse. That's on the back side of the existing building. And then on the opposite main frontage along Beach 75th Street, there exists most of the park's marshalling yard with the building here on the left. And then just south of the yard back here in this zone, there are a couple of traditional one-story, two-story beach bungalows that are common throughout the Rockaway neighborhood. On Beach 74th Street on this side of the site, there are several more beach bungalows along this side of the street as well as on this side. But then it gives way to a series of one-story, two-story commercial warehouses and car repair shops. Again, a very wide variety of different types of uses on the site. The site is low-lying, so sun access is very direct. There are no tall buildings nearby. Winds are primarily southerly and westerly. The current topography ranges from about 6.5 feet here on this side to about 9 feet on this side. And then, as I mentioned before, the site is between these two inlets and then very close to what is proposed to be a wetland preserve. The zoning map shows the variety of different land uses that surround it. There are several truck marshalling yards or repair shops across the way. The NYCT has the train trestle and occupies several of these areas for their equipment switches. The neighborhood really starts further to the east. And then, as you know, the Ahrens redevelopment plaza area is directly to the south. In terms of flood hazard, the site is within the proposed AE flood zone for the preliminary firm maps, meaning that the base flood elevation at this point is estimated to be 10 feet in terms of flood inundation. We are designing to that. In addition, Parks has desired that the project have a class 4 critical facility requirement, which adds another 4.5 feet or so to that base flood elevation, requiring a city CRDG designed flood elevation of 14.33 feet. In talking with Parks, we've decided to go further and to increase the operational level, which is the shop level, to 17.5 feet. So it's a full 10 feet above the existing ground level and an additional 3 feet above the 2080 or 2050 proposed flood requirement. Here's some photographs of the existing garage and how it sits on the site in red. Site again is about 1.25 acres. And in terms of siting the building, we're looking at it, placing it along the Beach 74th Street side to try and enclose and extend the urban design of that street. And then leaving the Beach 75th Street side as the primary marshalling yard for Parks vehicles. The advantage being that Beach 75th and Amstel Boulevard are wide streets. Beach 74th is a very narrow cartway. So that allows us to create a separation between the building, tying into the character of the neighborhood, and then this more open yard fronting the wide streets. And we show a couple of site sections here, the one up above, looking at on Beach 74th, the building related to the buildings that surround it. And then this one on Beach 75th, looking past the yard to the building outlined in the distance. So we've dubbed this scheme the Crow's Nest in a way as a nod to the activities that park staffers presented during Superstorm Sandy. It does allow, by lifting up the administration bar in green to the third floor level, it allows you a clean, unimpeded view down to the Marine Parkway Bridge, down the length of the peninsula. And then allowing also the building to nestle in within the existing buildings on either side. Here is the circulation from the neighborhood. Most people are coming, pedestrians, along this blue dotted line from the subway station to a pedestrian entrance that we've located on Beach 74th Street. Also, private vehicles here in the maroon color can enter on that narrow street, but most of the truck traffic we're trying to send along the wider streets along Beach 75th and Amstel Drive. This is a diagram of the fenestration. We want to make sure that we have enough daylight in the shop area. So the orange block has clear story windows on 3 sides. The administration level has this wraparound window, the quote unquote crow's nest at the office space and muster room. And then at the entrance, we have a series of double height windows at the lobby area. In terms of the site plan, you'll notice we've set the building back for zoning about 10 feet, and we've created a planted area there that would be mostly native plants. In addition, we've added several street trees along that frontage to soften the edge along Beach 74th Street. The rest of the site, we've kept the compactors and heavy truck traffic away from the residential houses that abut the site. In terms of the ground floor plan, as I mentioned earlier, this is mostly places for electric vehicles to be stored. The charging apparatus will be mounted on the ceilings, brought down, so it'll be safe from potential flooding. And most of it is open air storage, and then just a small footprint for the lobby. The main level is the shop level, which is 10 feet above grade. The orange area is the 6,000 square foot shop storage areas and hazardous material storage areas, taking up the balance of the floor plan. The third floor is this operational office headquarters, the main office here, the muster room and lounge for crew here on the right. Then lockers and additional spaces, restrooms here on this would be on the east side. I apologize. North is to the left of the diagram. And then on the roof, we are looking at a sustainable roof, whether or not it's photovoltaic cells or sedum in trays along the areas of the roof. Plus, most of our mechanical will be on top of the roof. You can see here in the sections the vertical organization of the building, the parking level, storage area, and office space here. The shop is a 1.5 height area on the adjacent to the administration block. And then the clear stories you can see on both sides or are on 3 sides of the shop area. And then lastly, we've started to look at the elevations, not fully cooked quite yet, but the idea here was that we'd like to lift up the administration block into an angled volume that is above the driveway that goes up, the ramp that goes up, giving that some distinction. And then along the yard side, we're creating a structural V to cantilever and the cantilever on a structural piece This is the elevation along Beach 74th Street on the top. In terms of materials, again, very early, but we're looking at insulated CMU block for the majority of the shop area. And then in terms of the administration block, fiber cement siding, hopefully as a recall to the bungalow wood siding that you see in the neighborhood. And then some views around the building. Here looking southeast, from the yard to the building, to the northwest. Some street views from inside the yard. This is going up the ramp from the yard area. This is on Beach 74th Street. This would be the pedestrian entry and small vehicle entry. This is across from Beach 75th, across the yard to the building, to the two-story houses and warehouses that are abut to the southeast of the site. A view of the cantilever, the yard, corner of Amstel and Beach 75th Street. Looking south from Beach 74th. And finally here, this view to the northeast. That's the presentation. I'll take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, comments, thoughts?
Would you mind
Guidance?
just talking about the pedestrian circulation a little from public transit and that entrance? You showed it, but I sort of wasn't able to quite process how that works.
Let me, if I may, just go back to the subway and bus locations are about 3 or 4 blocks away from the site, but most people will be coming in from the east. So this is the location on the site that's closest to that. And because it's the sort of more residential scale portion of the site, we're bringing most of the workers who are coming via public transportation along that site. We've worked with Parks. Parks would like to have their signal sign identifier, the maple leaf on that corner. And that is visible up to Rockaway Beach Boulevard, where most people are coming through. So the idea is that that pedestrian traffic is coming. It's about a 10-minute walk from the subway station. They're coming down Rockaway Beach Boulevard, turn down Beach 74th, and then the entrance will be essentially right here on the first floor of the building.
So is the entrance part of where the vehicle entrance is, or is it?
It's just beyond. You come through a gate here, walk along the building, and then the entrance is on the corner.
Okay, so the gate is on the right of the vehicle entrance.
Yes.
And then what happens once you get inside? Like, what's your journey like into your work area?
So since most people here are, let me see if I can get, apologize just 1 second. Let me just go here. So this is now on Beach 75th, looking at the corner of the building. You come along here, there's a double height entrance. Most of the levels up above are storage or work areas, but most people will go, if they're parks workers, if they are going to change into their uniform, they'll go up to the 3rd floor to the locker rooms, get their crew assignments at the office, and then either check out the vehicle that they need for the day or do work in the shop to maintain whatever item they need to maintain. So mostly it's very busy in the morning and the late afternoon, but during the day, it's really just office management staff. But the idea is that you do come in through here. There's an open stair that goes up to the 3rd floor or an elevator. And most of the crew areas are up here, but then they distribute going out to the yard or the shop during the day.
So if I'm understanding this right, you enter on the east, wrap around the building and enter from the building is entered from the west.
Really southwest. It's the corner of the building here, which is about 100 feet away from Beach 74th Street.
And for folks who are driving to this place to work, would they enter the same way? Like,
You-
where do they park? And
If you're in an electric vehicle, most probably, Parks electric vehicle, say, you'd come in that same way through that gate on Beach 74th, go into the parking level on the ground level. or you're coming along Beach 75th or Amstel from on the wider streets and can enter that same zone from this yard area here.
So there's not like a hierarchy in the entrance, everyone enters the same way, it's really just where you enter the kind of lot. That's
Exactly.
different.
And since most of the traffic coming to the site, you're either in a Parks vehicle or you're getting a Parks vehicle. There's no, and again, it's not a public facility in any way, shape or form. It's primarily Parks maintenance staff.
Okay, and then my last question is, I'm sure that Parks has spoken with you a great deal about the long-term, like the emergency use of this site, right? Given that everything's lifted up high.
Mhm.
So what, can you just speak a little bit to how this is designed for that kind of use?
Everything from the elevation 10 down to grade level is highly resistant to hurricane, to flood, high, low missile impact. The entire building will be designed to make sure that it makes it through the next climate
Right.
emergency.
Yeah, sorry.
But all electrical service rooms, water service rooms, a generator, those are all located elevation 10 and above.
Mhm.
So all primary equipment is located outside the floodplain.
And then, sorry, in times of emergency, when there's a flood, clearly you've thought through the equipment, how do people come and go in those times?
Well, the hope is that the elevator is on a reset so that if flood water does come in, it goes up to the upper level. We do have 2 concrete stairs that come down to grade. Also, the ramp does allow people to get from grade level up to the upper level. Frankly, the hope is that after the water recedes, everything else is operational up above, and it's mostly just cleaning for storm residue on the ground floor. There are no items that are breakable or expensive to replace on the elevation below the design flood elevation.
So if I'm coming during a flood and there's water in the lower levels, let's say still underwater or whatever, how do I get in?
If you have a Parks vehicle, you'll get into the lot. You could drive up the ramp to the upper level. If you are a person, God forbid, you're in a kayak, say, trying to get through, you can reach the either the stairs, the exterior stair on the east side or the west side, just within the building, and go up those stairs up to the upper levels.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding that exterior gate design and whether all of the gate is it similar in terms of height, and when would that distinction happen if there is a distinction of height or spacing between the gates that exterior gates? And how does that relate to, or does it relate to flood zone? Is there anything happening? Is it just open gate? And is it necessarily required for the front facing gate to be that high, or can, you know what I mean? Because there's already trees lined up.
Right.
So does it have to be that high? And would the height be reconsidered for any specific reason? As the other commissioner said, like, what if there is a flood? Is this high gate going to impede access to the space? Should we reconsider the height of certain places in case?
Forgive me here. Let me just go back to the view that's on Beach 74th Street. We have a 4-foot high sort of standard Parks fence at the street line. Behind that is the landscape area that you saw earlier, the green zone that would be native planting, and we're adding these street trees along the area. Parks has asked for the site to be secure during normal operations. So we do have a 6-foot fence here. Really is on a swing arm, so that will prevent cars from coming in unless you are coded to come in. And then there will be a gate, a personnel gate adjacent to that for Parks people who are carded to come in through that area. We do have an 8-foot high fence line that we're creating next to the house that is adjacent to us that will extend back into the interior of the site, really as both protection for us as well as to define their lot as well and provide security at that point. So we are looking at a 6-foot fence at the entrance It's right now just a standard metal picket fence. We could look at other things in terms of height. I do think we do want to make sure that at the building frontage, we do want to make it secure. We don't want people coming in and getting mixed up with the trucks or the elements that are being stored in the building. Although we do want to make sure that it's welcoming, so that's why we've provided that 4-foot fence at the street line.
More on the entry, how many people work in the building?
During the high season, summer, about 130, 140.
So the majority or almost all those people come on public transportation. They don't drive in their market cars.
I think it's a mix. Some people are coming via car. There are several people who are coming, multiple groups coming in from subway or bus. And then this was the closest point.
So the door that I'm looking at that's under, just to the right of Parks, which is for the stair, correct?
That's the exit stair,
That's
the
an exit stair.
exit door out. The
Door to go in.
right, the entrance door will be actually located at this point here.
I mean, I'm just, following these questions. I'd love to see as you, I know there's a different presentation. I'd love to see how you develop that entry and if you could show us, because that's a lot of people coming in there. And I was thinking too, in terms of the class 4, critical facility and how it was so interesting in the way you mentioned that it was used during Sandy. Even though there's nothing there. So I was thinking, well, who uses it? Is it just those 100 people or 2 people that are going there to get equipment and what, or is the community going? I just
No,
wonder,
it's
how is it being used? And
this is
to know where the front door is, I guess.
it is purely an operations and maintenance facility for Parks, and correct me if I'm wrong, Parks, one of the largest transects of parks throughout New York City, running from Broad Channel all the way out to the tip of Breezy to far Rockaway. So it's close to 50 parks, separate facilities in that area. This is the one facility that services all of that. So most of it is maintenance, most of it is park management. It is not accessible to the public, mainly because of all the equipment and frankly, there are some there are fuels and other types of oils being stored here that we don't really want the general public get mixed into. However, we are trying to provide a buffer there along Beach 74th so that it is a good neighbor to everyone on the street. 130 people, not all are coming on this side. A lot of them are coming along Beach 75th Street from the wide streets. Actually, if you are coming via car, that's actually the easiest because you're coming across from Rockaway or the Marine Parkway Bridge, which is to the west.
So you park in that lot
You'd either park in the lot or adjacent to the site,
on the north side.
north or west.
North or west. I mean, I'm just interested to see that pedestrian entry, clearly, because I know you're setting the mass and everything right now, just how that works and how I know where to go. Because the building is all about this gesture to the north and the lookout.
Right.
And that muster room that's up there. And so you're going towards that and under that clearly, right? That's a kind of signal to.
And well, I think the reason why we located the entrance in the middle of the site is because there are as many people coming from this side and doing activities out in the yard and as there are coming from the subway. So really the entrance is right here, the dead center in the middle of the site, accommodating both access. And it also allows us to sort of bifurcate the 3rd floor with the office space on one side and the crew rooms on the back side. So you come up in the middle and then split.
So there's a lot going on right underneath that process. You got the ramp going up.
Public entry. Right.
Sorting out a lot of things there.
Right.
And then the area under the ramp, I mean, I'm also interested in the fence, and I know it has to be a standard fence. It's so unfortunate. But the fence around the ramp, that you've got equipment stored underneath there, and at a certain point it becomes solid.
Yes, at the area to support the ramp, we have a series of columns that are supporting the area. The head height gets very low. But the area that's on the north side of that zone is fully accessible, and parks. This is where parks will store their trash cans that go out to the beach, or benches or other outdoor pieces of equipment. We wanted to keep it in a stored area so that it's not distributed across the site. And it's relatively easy for it all to be maintained in the zone.
But it's like, it's a solid piece, and then when you get headroom, you
Yes,
make it
open, right. To allow floodwaters to come in and out, to not provide a barrier for any of that to damage anything.
I wonder if the next, just building on what Lori said, if the next time we see after conceptual, if you could show us like what that journey feels like from Beach 74th. I'm walking in, I'm coming around, because in some ways right now, and I know it's not articulated yet, so I'm sure you're thinking of this, but it feels like I'm coming around the back. So it does feel like a kind of a hierarchy, like the important thing, people come by cars, and because I'm on public transit, I'm coming in the back, and having to walk around the building. And I think that could be made to be like a beautiful journey as you come along the side of the building and you've offered that green space to Beach 74th.
Mhm.
But maybe there's some way that can be wrapped around so that you don't feel sort of like you're less important if you come by public transit than if you drive up. And I guess I would wonder if you could show where people park bikes who are biking there also.
We have a protected bike area in that parking level as well. We can certainly do that for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, this is conceptual, but it's like, I think it's important that those two ways of arriving feel equally gracious.
Any more comments? Maybe then just to summarize, right? Concerns about the exterior fencing and keeping it as welcoming as we can. And I think that there's a strong feeling that both since this building was used by the community during the last superstorm, and since the Rockaway is a hugely low environment for lots of residential people, it's of interest, I think, to make sure that and you're going to great expense to raise the building so it's protected during a superstorm. It's of interest to everybody that the space be usable by the community in the event of another superstorm. And that way in which feeds into the other comments about how do you get into the building? Where do you enter? And while the parks employees will definitely know that because that's where they're working. If it were an emergency, and if there were, we want to understand how people move to that building from the surround, both the subway and those people who are coming by car, or as you suggested, by kayak during another storm. All of those things are in the commissioner's concerns as we move the project forward from conceptual to preliminary. Is that fair assessment?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on. Our next committee meeting is the preliminary and final review of the design prototypical public communication structures, link 5G, in residential zoning and historic districts, phase 1 pilot for installation citywide. We will not be hearing public testimony, and the presenters will start when they come in. Maybe while they're coming, I would feel unhappy if I didn't note the sad passing of a former PDC commissioner, James Polshek. He was an extraordinary member of this commission, and I was privileged to be present during a lot of his tenure. And he was exceptional in his generosity to our presenters in terms of the way in which he encouraged them to do more and greater design in each case. And I think we'll miss him. And he was generous to all of us, his fellow commissioners. So I thought it would be remiss not to acknowledge that. And thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
This is very important. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm
go
so
ahead,
sorry.
please. Sorry.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Brett from OTI. As you know, we were here in August and we spoke to you about Link 5G and seeking approval for siting in residence zoning districts and in historic districts. We certainly have had a long-standing dialogue regarding this project, very specifically in residence zoning districts. We heard your feedback, went back with the team, discussed a proposal that we think it provides a small portion of installations in resident zoning districts, a very limited number, and also addresses your concerns about understanding what the global kind of universe is of these types of solutions that are being deployed in other countries and other cities across this country. And we fully intend to come back to you in the near term to show those to you and talk to you about other ideas that may be possible and really show you why Link 5G is the solution for New York City. We will also continue the dialogue about conducting post-installation engagement with the public. We are very mindful of ensuring that the public has a voice, not only through their elected officials and community boards, but they themselves will have an opportunity to have a direct dialogue with the city, with the franchisee, and we can understand and have that conversation and address them as we move forward. So with that, I don't want to take up too much time. I'll turn it over to Nick from Sale. Nick, you could introduce yourself. He'll run you through the presentation and we'll be very happy to answer any questions.
Right. Thank you, Brett. I'm Nick Colvin. I've met you all before, so nice to see you again. Thank you for having us back. Joined by Margot Nee, who leads our external affairs and community affairs teams. So as Brett said, last time we met, we heard from community leaders, digital equity activists, workforce development leaders, as well as educators and many other people from the public and private sectors about the urgent need for a digital infrastructure to be deployed throughout our city. And I think we were all convinced of the particular need in northern Manhattan and the outer boroughs, areas historically left behind in investment like this. Now, Link NYC is but one program, as you know, of several that the city has to try to address this need, but it's unique amongst all of those programs. It's the only program that's required to deploy so much infrastructure, invest so much in these areas. It's the only program that's required to bring a digital safety net with it, along with the infrastructure. It's the only program that's permitted to install in new locations, filling in gaps in between the other programs. And it's the only program that's bringing a new type and design of infrastructure to the sidewalks of our streets. Now, we've worked for years on this design, for many months, very closely with this commission on refining the design prior to its approval for deployment in commercial and manufacturing areas. But as we heard last month, the need is greatest in residence areas. So this commission is rightly concerned with the design that's going to be deployed in residence areas. But it also rightly understands that we can't delay further in beginning to deploy this infrastructure. The need is too great. So you asked us to return with a proposal to allow us to commence work while giving a reasonable amount of time for us to continue to share with you the current global state of the art to ensure that New York City is getting the best design available today and one that will stand the test of time. So the proposal on the table today is 200 sites throughout the city, subject to all of the existing equity requirements in the franchise. And each site we're committing will have at least one carrier commitment to install cellular radios on the pole. There will be no empty poles deployed as part of this phase one. And we're making the commitment to you, as you requested, that as part of this phase one, or during our review, if we find another design that has all the capabilities of Link 5G, but is a design deemed superior from an aesthetic perspective by the commission, any sites that were deployed under the phase one will be replaced by that alternative design that was approved instead of Link 5G. So now I'm going to hand it over to Margot to discuss all of the many governance pieces in place, over siting in particular, but also community engagement and other rules. To the right.
So commissioners, many of you asked about what rules are already in place to guide site selections to ensure that they're in places that are most appropriate for New Yorkers. And as a reminder, as I said to many of you, there are 5 layers of regulatory approvals that already exist today, which are designed to optimize for siting location. The first one is the existing city code and regulations. This is where you see all of the rules that used to apply to payphones now apply to the links and prevent us from blocking street signs and traffic poles and subway grates and the like. The second review is what Nick mentioned, the level of public elected official review, which is when all new sites are submitted to the community district representatives and the borough president's offices, who then have 60 days to review and provide feedback. The third layer of review is a departmental agency level of review, much like your own. Oops, so I didn't do that. Sites that are adjacent to parks have to go to the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. Sites that are in historic areas also have to go through the Landmark Preservation Commission approval process. And there are other departments, including Department of Transportation, that are involved as well. Fourth layer of review, which is the Franchise Commission Review Commission. This just came into effect last year, and the rules that they put in place are specific to Link 5Gs. This is why we can only place 1 per block and why we have to keep all corner quadrants clear at intersections. And then, of course, fifth and last, but certainly not least, is the Office of Technology and Innovation surveys all of the proposed sites to ensure compliance and to assess fit within the community. So the reason we are asking for 200 sites for this phase 1 program is because we really think that is what will be required to satisfy carrier demand over the next 3 to 6 months. And it's important that we have sufficient inventory to satisfy their demand, because that is what will incentivize the carriers to make a financial commitment to invest in the program. As a reminder, no Link 5G will be deployed unless and until there is a carrier who's committed to installing in that location. As you know, the need for this program is felt throughout the city, but especially in the equity districts, which are the outer boroughs and above 96th Street in Manhattan. But there is some need in Manhattan below 96th Street as well. And it's also important that we be able to include some sites there, because again, that is what will incentivize the carriers who need to deploy citywide to make the financial commitment that's necessary to support the program. The reason there is some urgency behind this, and the reason we are asking you to approve phase 1 today, is because we have this chicken and egg problem with regard to timing. We can't select all of the sites because the carriers will not commit to them until they have full confidence that the program is going to unfold, including in residential areas. We have been able to give you 57 sites that we have gotten the carriers to commit to. The remaining 143 will be selected over the coming months. The need for this program is felt throughout the city. And if we delay approval for residential areas in phase 1, we'll only be delaying the critical investment that is necessary to support this program.
Thanks, Margot. So we wanted to paint a picture for you. And there was a question, I think, in the last hearing about how long does it take to actually install this type of infrastructure? And it's a very long time, frankly. So this is a picture of just one site and of all of the stages that it goes through. And just one site can take from the initial planning phases when we're talking to carriers to when it's activated can take 2.5 years. It's a very long lead time. Based on historic timing for the planning, review, construction, and activation phases of an installation, we expect this initial phase 1 to take over 2 years to complete just these 200 sites if we begin this month. So every month delay just pushes that out further and further. So we're going to walk through a few slides of sites. We shared this in advance, so I'm not going to stop and review each one in detail. But of course, if you want to stop me, we can talk about them, but I don't want to consume too much of your time since you've had these for, I think, a couple of weeks. Now, as Margot said, we have 57 of the 200 sites that we're asking for that have been committed to today. We're still in discussions with the 3 other carriers that have not yet committed, and hope that over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll be able to secure the majority or the entirety of the remaining 143 sites. So this is the big picture view of the city where these 57 sites exist. This slide contains the 38 sites that are strictly residential areas. 90% of them are above 96th Street and in the outer boroughs. And just to describe the map for you, the outlined blue areas are the targeted equity districts with the minimum number of deployments. The blue areas are part of the city's task force on racial inclusion and equity. And then you have the rest of the city, of course. So I'll just quickly sort of scroll through. We go sort of borough by borough, showing a selection of sites. Again, we've showed these in advance, so I won't dwell on them, but you'll notice a theme throughout all of these. So you'll see that there's open spaces. Clear lines of sight are required to get the greatest coverage from any given site. You'll also notice, gathering spaces or densely populated areas where there's a lot of people that need service. And also wide sidewalks. So again, it's critical for the program for each site to have as much open space around it as possible. And this aligns with the goals of fitting in and respecting public space in the communities that we're installing with. That's aligned with the goal of having as much space around these sites as possible. So we're really looking for as big an open area near as many people as possible. And that's where the carriers see the greatest demand. So on this next slide, we have the historic district sites. So there's 19 sites that were selected in historic districts. They're split between residence and commercial areas. And as a reminder, each one of these sites, just to say it again, has to be approved by the Landmarks Preservation Commission, as well as going through the community engagement process with borough presidents, community boards, and all of the other layers of review that Margot just walked you through. So when we met last, also you asked for data about the existing Link 5Gs deployed in terms of Wi-Fi and 5G usage. We only have a handful of sites that have been activated so far, but already, even though most of them have been activated for less than a month, we're seeing Wi-Fi utilization that is on par or higher than sites that have been online for years. At the first site at West Burnside in the Bronx, CBS News went out independently of us and interviewed people to see what they thought. And they found that people were already using the Wi-Fi, not just on the street, but in their apartments around the site. And the people were reporting that the Wi-Fi in their apartment was faster from the link than it is from the service they're paying for. As far as the 5G usage goes, as we've mentioned before, and because of this chicken or egg conundrum that we don't have any 5G radios currently installed in the links. We are working hard to solicit carriers for that, but we don't have any today. When we do have 5G radios deployed, we will ask for that data. We want to provide that to you. But the carriers, I have to say, consider this data highly proprietary and confidential, and they've refused in the past to share this data with us. However, I just want to emphasize something Margot said, which is that each one of these sites requires hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment, both from us and from the carriers. No one's going to spend that kind of money if there isn't a real need and demand to provide service to New Yorkers that they need. Approval of this phase one is really going to allow the program to begin making some progress towards its goals of bridging the digital divide. And while it does so, we will continue our dialogue with you regarding the global design comparisons and how best to solicit community input and share that with you and the public. So we thank you so much for the opportunity and your consideration on our phase one proposal today. We're happy to answer any questions. And I'm going to invite Ray LaChance also in case we get any wireless questions. He's CEO of Zenfi Networks, our partner at CityBridge, and the real guru of 5G on our team.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And, I think it's extremely helpful to finally be at a point where I think we understand the connection between the carrier's demand and the need for the poles and the placement of the poles. And not to go through past history, I don't think that was ever honestly portrayed in this commission before. And I'm grateful that we're finally understanding it, that you can't bear the expense of placing one of these poles until there is a carrier commitment. And the carriers are going to make their independent assessments of what demand is, notwithstanding the fact that there's obviously a huge amount of demand outside of the wealthier parts of our city. And I think it also is extremely helpful that we now see a proposal that is specifically limited to a limited number of new poles that we can evaluate once done. 200 or 10% seems like a reasonable number to give you some critical mass to give the direction to the carriers that this is a real program moving forward. And therefore, seeing that only 57 of the 200 are already committed is an interesting fact to understand that this isn't a cakewalk for anybody, in the sense that it is experimental. And that also, maybe most importantly, combined with your commitment that should, which we would desperately like, there to be a better design for the poles that the franchisee and their city agency have committed to replacing the pilot poles with the better design poles. I'm not wrong about that, but I keep reading that in the materials, and I think that that's super helpful. Like everyone, I continue to believe in this importance. I think this step, should we take it today, will be extremely useful. But I still am very concerned about the aesthetics of the poles. It's nice that the ones you've shown us are in wide open areas. It's nice that the wide open areas technologically benefit poles, as well as probably our vision of what a street might look like with one of the poles. But I still think our job would be much better if we were comfortable with the design. So keep us, if it does go forward, keep us informed and an honest assessment of whether there's an alternative that is better than what we're seeing. But I think the project deserves to get a start, and I think the limitation and focus you brought us today is much better than what we've seen before. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think also seeing the layers of approval that the product needs to cascade through is also very useful. So I think, the arguments for equity, of course, are very convincing and, make a lot of sense to me. And, I think knowing that each site will have 4 to 5 layers of approval beyond, this commission, I think is useful to know, and sort of giving our approval to allow the project to go forward. So, speaking for myself, giving that approval. In terms of the aesthetics, actually, since our last meeting, I've seen 2. I saw one on 2nd Avenue and 2nd Street, and then another one on Essex Street. And actually, when they're on, I've said this before in discussions, but when they're on the avenues, they're actually dwarfed quite a bit. But they don't feel too imposing to me, actually. And those are, I assume those are in the commercial zones too. It also has to do with the buildings that they're around also. So when they're around very modern buildings, post World War II, I think it actually, to me, actually fits into the environment. It's about as imposing to me as a Cobra light. And so actually, I think aesthetically for the design, they don't actually feel too imposing to me. One thing though, I have noticed people posting them on social media, and they don't know what they are. And so I think design is very modern. Some people I think take that as kind of a bit foreign, or almost like a spaceship in some ways. So I think having some kind of symbol or logo that says what it is, I don't think it needs an explanation, but if it just says 5G network of some sort. And I think we approved something like this for the shrouds that go on top of the light poles. So I think that could be used as a kind of reference, but just saying, I think it says link NYC, but it doesn't say that it's 5G. And so even just on social media, I've noticed people saying this is interesting, but what is this?
It's a great suggestion, Commissioner. And we were happy to put a sticker on the side with a QR code or something to find more information. We can also put that on the tablet when the sites go online as well, so that stickers tend to get ripped off. So, but we're happy to make sure that people are able to find out what it is. It's a big priority for us as well. We've been, doing community outreach. We're building teams to go out. We call street teams to go out and educate folks. We were thinking around the activation so they'd understand the services, but this is a good suggestion that we get ahead of that, so that while they're there waiting for Con Ed to power them, they also have some information about what they are.
Manuel's point just triggered. I do think it's important and much clearer that people understand the distinction between the Wi-Fi availability at the and the 5G carrier capabilities of the poles. And I do think that people will use the Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi, and I think that there's nothing more dedicated toward the digital equity part of your presentation than the free Wi-Fi, right? Because the carrier service is a paid service without question. So I think we should definitely make sure people know the poles continue the availability that exists in the link program around Manhattan, because people should use it. It's great.
It's a great suggestion to differentiate. And, I just want to raise the point that over 90% of New Yorkers have cellular service that is going to be upgraded to 5G, regardless of whether they want it or not. And so they will benefit from that's part of the digital equity is the cellular service.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And Commissioner, and Nick, you just said it, I just want to underscore that point. New Yorkers are increasingly utilizing their cell phones as their only means of connecting to the internet while at home. So while yes, they're certainly paying for that service,
Right.
having a robust availability of it is.
I agree. That otherwise there'd be no point to what you're doing.
Right.
So
Yeah,
what you're doing is great.
exactly.
All I'm saying is there are 2 points to what you're doing, and we should not
Completely.
neglect the free Wi-Fi because it's free, which is
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah, I just wanted to, agree also with Commissioner Miranda and Ahrens that, I did to find what it is, because I also went to see one and I knew what it was, just because you told me, but, so I didn't look for it. But people on the street did not know what it was, had no idea. And, so I think both some kind of branding on it, and it's a sticker that has to peel, so it can't be in the material itself, like you could also etch it in, A. B, the display, because the one I saw wasn't on yet.
Right.
Right, so once it's on, because we don't know what that's gonna be like, I mean, I imagine what it would be like, it's like the iPad or something. But if is it always on, and if it's not on, I have to touch it, or, how do I know?
Right.
What it is and what it's providing for me, I just feel that is so important, and then the third piece is the interface that we spoke about, I think on Friday, which is that there's feedback. That the community, because the community knows so well how things work,
Yep.
we can all study this as architects and planners and designers, but they really understand what works in their area, so. We need to make sure that interface is functioning.
Absolutely. We couldn't agree more. If you can convince Con Ed to give us power faster at these sites, we will get them on today. We would love for them to be on. Yeah, neither do we, but we're trying hard. We really do want to get them on and take your point about before they're being on, having a way for people to get that information. Absolutely. So we'll incorporate that.
So they'll only know when the screen is on, then they'll know what it is.
No, we'll find a way to get the sticker on there before the screen's on,
Or
so
maybe
that,
it
so,
could be more
right?
of a sticker.
Yeah, the idea
Well-
of putting something into the polls. Yeah.
I mean,
Just
just.
need
Well-
the last part of what you said. I just don't know.
The idea of etching something into the polls.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful.
my concern with that is that if that becomes permanent and we may want to say something different or people will become
Okay.
familiar with it, right? And we do, just to note, we have people visit these sites once a week. And so if the sticker does get removed, we can put it back and we can make sure that it's always there.
I also concur with the rest of the commissioners, and I wanted to, reiterate how important feedback from community, especially post installation.
Yep.
That we, figure out a way to assess that information or that data, and that it is something that is accessible to the public in some way or fashion. I also have a quick question about, future development around these Link 5G, like, is there some way that, I guess now they're going to be placed where there's a very few things around it, but in the future, how do you anticipate working with developers or the city to ensure that service does not depreciate or get worse because now there's other development around it? So that's something that I really think you should study or consider or have in dialogue with.
Absolutely. Yeah, we speak extensively, both with the city and city agencies, as Margaret talked about. We also speak with owners of buildings and people who are developing in the areas around the existing structures and where future structures would go. We have a pretty robust program for that. And people are not bashful, particularly building owners and landowners are not bashful about reaching out to us when they, before the pole's even installed, honestly. The sites are public, when they're approved, they're public information. So people find out about them in advance and reach out.
Thank you. You spoke about that you have one carrier for 57 already.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, part of the reason for the mass and design of the pole as it is that it can house up to 5 carriers, right? And the idea is that there would be competition, and that's the business model. And also the idea that there would be lower price, right, for
Sure.
consumers.
Yep.
I'm wondering if, let's say, one company becomes the dominant one, and it turns out that like there just isn't interest from 2 or 5 carriers over time, which we have seen that in other markets in the city. Do you anticipate that your business model could do like, how many do you have to keep it viable?
I think, Ray, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. So one thing I do want to point out is that when we talk about a carrier on a site and the 5 bays that are available, a single carrier will likely take multiple bays within that site. If you imagine,
Oh, I see.
if you imagine it to be like a cell tower
Yeah.
that has multiple technologies on it. So they use different bands for different types of transmissions, different capacities and speeds. So when we talk about 5G, we're talking about an ecosystem of technologies that includes everything from existing bands that supported 3 and 4G in the past that just use different protocols. And now newer, higher capacity bands, we may hear the term millimeter wave. That's a new technology that's being used with 5G. So they'll put a millimeter wave radio, they'll put the traditional 4G radios, but they communicate using 5G protocols now. So that's what's happening. So the 5G network is an evolution of the old 4G network, plus the addition of new technologies that are bonded together with an ecosystem of protocols that make it all work together. There was also a comment earlier on developments and technologies. The mobile networks are evolutions, right? They started with an umbrella network that covered the whole city of New York, at one time, just few, tens or hundreds of cell towers. Now there's thousands, right? So you create that umbrella to create coverage, and then you add capacity where you see the dominant uses, right? So in very dense areas where you all share the same signal. This is an important thing to note. When you use a cell service, you're sharing a signal from a single site. To add capacity, we either add spectrum, more of those radios, or we add more cell sites. So we're in a phase now in the evolution of the networks that we're adding cell sites at street level, because we have rooftops, we have building facades, we have towers. Now we're enhancing capacity by adding it at the street level. Ultimately, as the evolution of these networks, move forward, we go from 4G to 6G. That's about a 10, 12-year cycle for these Gs, right? You would expect that there's going to be a cell site in every corner, every single corner. You're going to see, and that's going to be 10 years from now, right? 12, or further. But today we're adding many technologies. We're going to keep evolving these sites and adding technology. So while there may be one carrier, which I don't expect that to be the case, by the way, I expect that there'll be multiple commercial operators, but deploying many technologies here as we.
Okay, thank you. I did not understand that. So really, it's not like 5 bays in all with a different carrier. It may be one with the different technologies.
It could be a single carrier using all 5.
Got it.
At some point as the technology evolves. But I do expect multiple commercial carriers to take. I mean, look, the 2 big ones, Verizon and T-Mobile in our market, will likely eventually bank at every one of these, and then of course AT&T. Now Dish is entering where Dish networks, the satellite TV providers got into this business. They're the 4 of the mobile operators.
Thank you.
In this extraordinary pulling together of the 200, that you've got to make this happen. And we should not, agency, work in any way to prevent this important need, because we can go on, but you've got to do it. And we've got to see how it works. And you have described the process of approvals in various ways and so on. Okay, so you've got the 53 or 54, and then we've got another 143. You're moving, you want to do, am I correct, roughly the 200 with everything that is entailed should go forward in the next 4 to 6 months, if that's fair. And that presumably you would come back to us, perhaps in committee or staff, and so to be able to tell us how you are doing here. Okay, now coming back to Phil's point, I think we all want you to go forward. Phil at least raised, he still has a concern about the aesthetics. Now that's a difficult thing. Some might say the height, the use of a shroud, whatever. That as I looked at some of the locations that you described, for example, a number of them are, a pole would go up and it's very low rise all around, and you don't, and say, okay, this one pole that is going to serve X numbers of subscribers. On the other hand, during the 6-month period, won't you be needing also the landmarks approvals in the historic districts? And if so, might there not be in that situation concern from their point of view about, I'm using the word aesthetics carefully, and that it could, about the design, about the height and so on. So I think it's part of the, as I've been thinking about, and I absolutely support the struggles of my co-commissioner, because we work together to above all make this happen, and for you to get this to happen quickly. How can you, will you be coming back? Might there be modifications in the so-called aesthetics and design that come from a number of the communities, and that might have ramifications overall for you and the potential carriers? Or might that be immaterial? The whole idea is let's move it along and get the carriers to do it, and don't prevent this.
Well, so it's a great question, Commissioner. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, but it's
Okay.
you all have good questions.
Okay.
And that is a particularly, obviously, the real key question for this commission, right? And I spoke with Commissioner Miranda about this. I'm personally passionate about not just the project, but the aesthetics of the city. I live here. We all live in the city and care a lot about the city. I truly believe that this is the best design for this type of infrastructure. To be clear, it's big. There's no denying that, and that I've got my own misgivings as a resident of the city about putting big things in the streets, right? But for this type of infrastructure, that's the requirement. We've worked really closely with antenna design to make this type of infrastructure as clean and unobtrusive as it can possibly be, while ensuring a uniform look throughout the city. And in fact, in the low-rise areas where it's sort of intuitively you assume that a tall structure in a low-rise area is going to stick out like a sore thumb, antenna picked a color for the shroud that actually makes it blend in with the sky. And I've heard, I think, and other people have told me, they think it's actually less obtrusive in those areas because it sort of disappears into the backdrop of the sky. So we worked really hard to make this a great design, and we're to come back and share the current state of the art throughout the world. And I hope that you'll agree. Again, understanding it's a big structure because of the type of infrastructure it is, that is really the best design that we can get for the city. But we're going to continue that conversation. We'll bring back designs to show you and talk you through why it is the size that it is and all of that sort of stuff.
And may I just add one thing about the timing? Are you able to go back?
Sure.
To the slide that shows the long timeline for installation? Commissioner Shepherd, you mentioned a good point, which is that in some sense, we do need to get started in order to be able to have meaningful information about the program and how it's developing. And the process for actually installing a Link 5G, actually, can you go back to one more, this one. It takes a very long time for us to go through those 5 layers of review and then to actually, and there are sub layers of obviously of those 5, then for us to actually go out and do the installation work, which is a massive construction and infrastructure project that involves so many levels of permitting, it's difficult to explain. It can take much longer than 3 to 6 months. Some of the sites today may take into the end of 2023 and into 2024. And that's really what's driving our urgency to begin this process. Because if we delay by another couple of weeks or another couple of months, the net impact is that we may be ultimately delaying deployment in residential areas for years. And that's why we're asking you to consider this today.
I'm just curious, if you go to your map of the site, so you currently have 57 sites proposed. Is that correct?
In total, right.
So for those, what is your percentage estimate breakdown of equity versus non-equity, and also for the original, for the 200, the initial 200, what's your breakdown of equity versus non-equity?
So the overall program is required to have 90% above 96th Street and in the other boroughs, and this meets that bar. Now, it's not required on a residential versus historic district basis. It just so happens that that's what the carriers have demanded as well. So it aligns nicely with that goal. But I do expect the vast majority of demand to be in the outer boroughs and above 96th Street, because that is where the majority of the need is. And we talked about
Equity areas.
that.
Areas like Brooklyn Heights, Park Slope, Cobble Hill, Williamsburg, these are not necessarily equity areas.
I mean, it depends.
I don't think you can lump all 5 or the 4 outer boroughs as equity areas. So my question is just a general percentage breakdown. I know that goal is 90%, but for this initial installation, what is your percentage breakdown of equity versus non?
I don't know if we have that number, but I wanted to add one thing and then I'll let Ray jump in, which is that you may recall in one of our prior meetings, we also mentioned that there are, and I know this terminology can get confusing, there are 13 districts in the outer boroughs and below and above 96th Street that have been designated as equity districts, which are areas not like Park Slope, Brooklyn, but areas that did have a pronounced need, which the Office of Technology Innovation identified for us last year. And we have specific numbers of links that have to go into those areas. There may be some overlap in this initial set, but even if there isn't, we still have to meet those minimum requirements. And that's really how we're bridging the equity district
But
area.
in your initial plan, are you meeting those requirements, or is the percentage breakdown different for this initial installation?
So we're going to need the full, deployment to reach all of the goals, right? And in order to have the carrier commitment to the sites, which we need in order to get them engaged, right? We don't want to put empty poles up there. Like, we need to follow their demand. So we're not applying a subset to these sites, but the overall program will absolutely reach that. And as you can see, we didn't pick these sites. These were selected by a carrier, and they are all in the outer boroughs, largely in equity. But again, equity is defined many different ways. So there's the Task Force on Racial Inclusion and Equity. There's the 13 community districts, which is out of dozens, right?
But taking all of that into account, which I understand, I'm just, because all of those would qualify as equity. For this map here that you're showing us, what is the basic percentage breakdown?
Yeah, please.
So I believe, well, I'll have to check on this, but I believe it's about 25% of these sites are falling, these residential sites are falling within equity areas.
25%.
Approximately. And I do want to, it's important to note here that the mobile operators that we work with came to us with a list of sites, a couple hundred sites in this case, that we're validating. And many of those are in commercial and industrial. And then the residential piece here are these
57, 38 residential, and then 57 total in this set that we have.
Right. So we're taking we're taking the set they're giving us to solve their problems, right? We can't say, we can suggest, we can attempt to incent them to go to these areas, but they really drive, and they have budget cycles. And if they don't use that budget here, then they'll use it somewhere else and they'll do something else with it. So this is our bite at the apple for this set with this particular carrier. that came to the table that wanted to work with us in this first phase of this program. They really drive. I mean, it's carrier supported. This is really a carrier supported program. The carrier pays for this. The carriers, the mobile operator. When I say carriers, I mean mobile operators. So this is what they're asking for today. But again, to answer your, I believe it's about 25% of these sites that you see represented here are within equity.
Thank you.
Sorry, Commissioner Keel, just to directly address the question. It's more than just a goal in terms of the equity commitment. It's an absolute requirement in the franchise agreement so that not, as Nick mentioned, 90% of new sites are above 96th Street and the outer boroughs, and we will obviously hold them to that requirement. And then just to add on to what Ray just noted about the carriers' demand in those equity districts, I think we can attribute that largely to the policies of the city of OTI, with your help certainly over these last couple of years as it relates to the Pultop program, is that the carriers are picking sites in those equity districts. They're not just focusing on Midtown Manhattan and the areas that have traditionally gotten overbuilt. They're looking at those areas without real kind of any other measures or efforts on our part to direct them there, other than enforcing our contracts and working with the carriers in general to build out in those equity districts.
Are there any other, maybe I'll just summarize. So what we may be approving later is, I think it's important to restate a pilot program, right? And I think we all feel strongly that now with better and more honest information from the applicant as to what's driving the program, we're enthusiastic about letting you get going and see whether or not we can have a rational basis that balances the aesthetics with the needs and the financial drivers of the carriers and the community involvement, so that when you do come back for greater than the 10% that's part of the original franchise agreement, we'll have an opportunity to review all of these issues. Are they, is it a success? What's the community response? Is it living up to what we're all saying? Are people using it in the way we expect them to use it? Is there a provision for providing for those districts which, from an equity perspective, need it the most? And we'll have a better sense based on a more direct and clear discussion from you as to whether or not, from an aesthetic point of view, as guardians of the landscape of the city, we're willing to say, okay, we can go from 200, right, to 2,000 of these poles, remembering that it was only a month ago, right, that the last payphone was removed from the sidewalks of the city of New York after a 25 to 40 year run. So these are really difficult decisions for us. And we care deeply, as I know you do, and thank you for mentioning that, about how our streets work and the landscape works. It's nice to hear from Manuel and from Lori, who've actually gone to see them, that they can become lovable street furniture. I'm delighted to hear that. I'm welcoming my own visit to see if I have that response. But nonetheless, I do want to emphasize, I think for all of us, that this is if we get there, it's a pilot approval, and we're really going to be looking carefully at what comes back to make sure all the concerns of the commission at least have been part of the process you're undertaking. So,
right. By the way, 2 blocks from where I live, there is a payphone. The booth is.
I have
there.
the same one.
The
We live
same
on the
one.
west side, but that's the last one, Apple, and that's for movies, I think. It's a relic.
It's a relic, but in good shape.
Yes.
Just one quick question on everything you said, which I think is very good. The approval, we are approving the pilot project as described over this in approximately 6 months of you doing this for the pilot of approximately 200 sites. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, there's no time limitation at all.
Oh,
I mean,
okay, all right.
no, I mean, unfortunately, I think it will take more time. You're welcome to, you've come back like monthly for the last bunch of months. You're welcome to come back anytime. We're happy to see you in committee or at the commission. But I think we expect when you do choose to come back or have information you'd like
Yeah.
to share, that you share it with the same degree of openness and candor that I believe we're now seeing. And I deeply thank you for that.
Yes, I agree, certainly.
And just want to note that before, I would like to see the completion of the pilot program before you guys come back with, you know, the data and information communicated in whatever format you let us know it's going to come back to us. Yeah, all the data and information regarding equity as well as the success or feedback from the community.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we will take a short break and close the committee part, and you're on the agenda. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hello, for everyone joining on Zoom. The meeting will recommence momentarily. We'll be restarting and putting back on the video, but in the meantime, please bear with the end of the scheduled break. Thank you.
Live again, are we good? Okay, I see the yes from 2 people. Okay, so welcome back. We're back from our break. As a reminder, this meeting is being held in person at City Hall and also remotely. If you're joining us via Zoom and would like to testify, please sign up through the Google form and also linked on the meeting agenda. And for the public hearing, again, please note that we're reviewing the design of the amphitheater, but again, testimony should be related to the amphitheater and not the park design. I will hand it over to Phil to do consent items first before we move on to public hearing.
Thank you. We will now begin the public meeting with the consent agenda. Items 28202 to 28229. Staff has noted Commissioner Morgenthal's recusal from 28212 and my recusal from 28202. Are there any other recusals to note? No. Let the record show there are no other recusals. I'll now call for the vote. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote for the consent agenda. Lori? Karen? Deborah? Manuel?
Approval.
Ethel?
Approval.
Mary? And I vote to approve all as well. So the consent agenda is approved unanimously by the commission. We will now continue with the public hearing portion of the meeting with item 28230, construction of an amphitheater in the East River Park, Manhattan. Per standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation, then a public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We will hear in-person testimony first, followed by the testimony from remote participants. And now, if you're ready, we'll hear the presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, commissioners and PDC staff and team for having us today. My name is Q Amiri. I'm with the Department of Design and Construction, Coastal Resiliency Unit. I'm the Deputy Director of Design and Community Engagement. I'm going to kick us off with a quick intro and introduce our team here, and we'll hand it off to our design team to walk you through our design slides and details. DDC is the lead agency for the design and construction for the overall larger Eastside Coastal Resiliency Project, and this project is a canopy structure over the outdoor amphitheater that's included as part of the ESCR project in the East River Park. Before we go any further, our project team here, we have colleagues from Department of Design and Construction, and for the sake of efficiency, I'm just going to go through the agencies. We have our parks colleagues, Department of Parks and DOT and DEP, I believe, might be on the call virtually. And we have our design team, One Architecture, AKRF, and MNLA consultants here. If I missed anybody, please forgive me. Really quick, this project started off as a canopy during the design process of the overall East Side Coastal Resiliency Project in 2019. while we were going through the design process and the ULURP phase, we received feedback and requests from the community to include structure over the outdoor amphitheater. The outdoor amphitheater itself is designed and already incorporated into the construction of the overall project. In the interest of time and not holding up the project schedule, we put the canopy structure on a separate design track. In 2019, we formed a amphitheater working group that included 2 sessions, 2 design charrettes with the community members who signed up for that working group, as well as a presentation to the community board. Shortly after that, we went on a short pause for securing the funds for this structure, and pandemic happened. And we picked this back up again early this year in 2022. And we continued with our outreach. We had another design charrette with the amphitheater working group and a presentation to the community board, status update. And the final presentation that we had to them for the preliminary design was back in June, that we received our resolution in support of the project. From there, we made a little more design progress, and we will go back to the community again, to the community board, to show the progress in the final design of this project. Overall, this is an important component of the East River Park for the community and the identity of the park. So the team has put in a lot of effort. They started off with a feasibility study in 2019 and did a lot of research on the previous band shell that existed there, and sort of built on the feedback and the comments that were received from the community and the community boards. And here we are with design sort of more than halfway through, I suppose, in preliminary. And I'm going to hand it off to our design team, Matt Stout from One Architecture and Aaron from M&LA.
All right, thank you. So I'll start by walking through the previous amphitheater and structure. So what you see here is an aerial image of the previous amphitheater and the Coilers Hook Bridge crossing the FDR here. I think one important point to make is that the previous amphitheater was a very formal axial design that really just carried this line through. The structure we're talking about today is replacing this structure on the stage. And I think another important note to make here is that the previous stage and structure was about 80 to 90 feet from the shoreline edge. And we'll talk about how that design has changed, but it's important to note here. Looking at that previous structure, you can see an image on the left here that is a picture of the structure under construction in 1941 when they originally built East River Park. As you can see here, originally it was a larger building, a full recreation center. And the structure that we all know that was recently demolished was actually just the front end of that building. This recreation center fell in disrepair in the 70s and 80s. And a 2001 renovation is more or less what you see in this photograph that was taken in 2019. So the original building was removed, leaving just the front face for the performance, and an ornamental canopy was added. At the bottom, you can see the relative dimensions of the width of this was 35 feet, and the top of the actual ornamental canopy was about 52 feet high from the orchestra level. Here are a few images showing what that structure was like, both from the city and from the water. So on the left, this is a photograph if you're just walking across the Coilers Hook Bridge and just immediately arriving in the park. So what the previous structure did that we found very striking is that there is this kind of moment of arrival. You could see the structure over the edge of the amphitheater, and the ornamental canopy kind of sticking up in the air there. From the East River, you can see that it was, again, about 80 feet from the shoreline, kind of tucked into the landscape, and really kind of like in a part of the park. And we thought that was a really striking takeaway as well. Looking in more detail about the structure itself, there are really, let's say, two key takeaways that we thought were really something important to continue on with the design. The first one was that when they removed that back building, it created a clear sight lines directly to the water. And we felt that was a really great element for the original design, or the original structure. And then the second was that is that this structure really acted as a pavilion as well, and not just a backdrop for like large scale performances, but it was really doing a dual purpose as a backdrop for concerts and a kind of park pavilion. And we really wanted to embrace that idea. Here's a couple photographs of what the performances were like with the original structure. The left is a large event. So this is a summer stage event where over 1,000 people are in attendance. And you can see that in these kinds of large events, the organizers bring all of their equipment in. They build a new stage, they build all the rigging, and they bring in lighting and amplification and sound booth and the like. But for the most part, most of the events that happen in this area are smaller events. People will bring amplification and for the musical instruments, et cetera, but it's usually a lighter event, lighter touch event, and it's something with a little bit less formal. And so that really led us to a conclusion that this design really needs to be able to accommodate multiple scales and multiple program types. And so how do you design a structure that works not only well for these really large events, but works for small events, and also really is an amenity for the everyday use for the park. And so this brought us to a question: is this a amphitheater bandshell or is it a park pavilion? And we really think it's both. So the 5 key points for the concept for this design is, one is to embrace this arch shape. Not only is that something that the original structure did, but this is also an homage to a more classic bandshell architectures. And the second was to really formally address the amphitheater in a strong way. And you can see in the model, as well as in this image, we really wanted to make something that was tall enough so you could see it over the hill when you enter the park, and really gives you that kind of moment of arrival. The third is how we can have an opportunity here to address the waterfront. So the stage has moved closer to the Esplanade. And so now we really have an opportunity to kind of activate that back edge, so to speak, and really make something that's both of the water and the amphitheater. The fourth was related to that, was that we really wanted to have a sense of lightness and openness. And so this led us to the concept that you see here, which we call an open arch scheme, where we have 4 arches that are in parallel, but then open up on one side in order to create visibility and a walkable space through the structure itself. So in this area. And last but not least, it was very important for us to design this so it performs acoustically. And so the undersurface is calibrated in order to ensure that sound reflects down into the landscape and down into the stage area, as not to send sound over the highway. And this will improve not only the acoustics for like smaller events, but mitigate that kind of sound projection as much as possible with the structure. And with that, I'll pass it to Erin to talk quickly about the landscape design.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Erin McCabe. I'm a landscape architect from MNLA. I'm just going to go through quickly some of the landscape changes surrounding the canopy structure. So this is the site plan as it was approved in December 2019. The only thing I want to highlight here is that there have been no changes to the precast seating. So all of the seating area here, or the lawn seating, anything backward of this first row of seating has not been adjusted at all. And then that a central component of the landscape design was always to improve accessibility. So this design included an accessible path to the upper level of seating here, and then also to the sort of orchestra pit area in front of the stage and the seating here, ensuring that there were multiple accessible areas and different places for people to sit and enjoy performances. With the new design, we've also added an additional path, which is this small access path to the stage, with the idea that this would be primarily for loading, small hand truck loading during performances, or to set up for performances, but also that it provides accessible access to the back of the stage for performers who need it. Other changes that I wanted to highlight, the stairs here have been moved off access from the back of the stage, so that when you're looking at the stage, you're going to have a nice view of green and then the water behind it. And the stairs where people will be moving up and down lead to more of a backstage area here that will be off center of people's view and partly obscured by the structure, with the idea that that could be sort of used as a staging area during performances as well. We've also added just a couple of seating elements here, the same kind of precast seating that's used inside the amphitheater as an additional space to sit and look at the embayment. So this is the section of the amphitheater as approved in December 2019. And this is the section with the canopy structure added. And the only thing I wanted to highlight here is that we've actually pulled back the stage edge a little bit. Just here. This is actually a finding from the acoustic study that it would be better to have performers fully under the structure so that they're projected towards the audience and not, further out back or, not taking advantage of the acoustics of the structure at all. So we pulled that edge back, which also has a nice effect of creating a slightly larger, more generous area here, for standing area, for dancing, or for temporary seating. I'm going to hand it back to Tom.
Okay, great. I'll just take that one. Yeah, and before I move to the next slide, I think this section really shows how we've calibrated the height of the top of this arch. So when you enter from, this is Cuyler's Hook Bridge here. So when you enter, you can see the top of this structure and also see through the lower portion of it. We really wanted to make sure that certain views were really captured straight through the building or through the structure itself. Now we're zooming in on the plan a bit. So these are this is a new path that Aaron was talking about that really guides you into that back arch. The idea here is that the front arch is directed straight toward the seating. The back arch is directed toward the waterfront and parallel to the esplanade. And this really gives us an opportunity to really flare open this northern side and create openings where people can walk and move through. And this creates a stronger connection, both visually and physically, to the waterfront. Here you can see a more zoomed in section of the structure itself. So again, this upper, the larger arch is more or less 30 feet high from the stage, and the lower one is more or less 12. So really thinking about how the seating side can be larger and more about performance events, and the backside can be smaller and more intimate and more about the water. The blue lines you see here are actually how we expect the sound to reflect off of the faces of these arches. We've calibrated this face that is bouncing off here to make sure that we're directing that sound into this area as much as possible. Here you see elevations, the front and the back. I think this also illustrates the variation in scale that we're aiming to achieve with the larger arch and the smaller arch, and also a kind of difference in material. And you'll see in the next slides our thoughts about material. But the idea is that the undersurface would be glass reinforced concrete panels. So this would be a textured concrete surface, and the top surface would be painted white steel, giving a kind of smooth and clean edge. So moving through some of the renderings to the site, again, we're at that moment where you're standing at the Cuyler's Hook Bridge. So you're standing right here, looking toward the structure, and this is where we're really wanting to achieve that kind of moment of arrival and an ability to actually even see through the lowest arch to the water. As we're moving forward into the actual seating area, you can see how we're really looking to maintain this kind of transparency as much as possible, to really be able to see through the structure, walk through the structure, and it becomes something that you occupy in different ways. And the last rendering here is more what it feels like along the waterfront. Again, you can see those kind of open arches here. You can see all the way through to the green foliage beyond. And we're really excited about how this structure then again changes in scale as you get closer to the waterfront in order to really make it feel like a kind of waterfront, intimate waterfront pavilion, and really kind of anchor the landscape. And we're excited about how this space might feel once these trees actually grow in, and this structure feels a part of the landscape itself. talking about the structure, the structural design is a tube truss, a 5-core tube truss frame. And again, it will be clad on the bottom with glass reinforced concrete panels on the bottom. And the top will be thick gauge steel with a architectural paint finish. And here's the palette of how we expect this to work with the rest of the landscape elements. So we really have two key materials here, the precast panels and the painted concrete. So we imagine to have a strong language connection between the precast that we'll see in the seating and the landscape and our structure itself. And just moving through a couple of photographs of the model that you see on the table, these can give you a good sense of the overall, the way that the structure addresses that seating area and landscape. This right image, I think, really captures this goal of having a strong connection between the bridge and the structure itself. And more zooming in on what this widened pathway that Aaron was talking about, really making this feel more fluid and more open and more accessible. And then looking at the water facing side, so you get a sense of what it's in terms of scale, what it would feel like to walk up this ramp and go through the back edge. And again, trying to create something that feels like an intimate kind of pavilion along the waterfront. And lastly, just the front and back elevations here. This is a model image similar to the rendering we were just seeing, what it would be like when you enter at the bridge, and then what this elevation feels like if you were taking the ferry, for example, across this area. And that's it.
Do we have any in-person testimony? No. Okay. Rebecca, handing it over to you. Do we have any remote testimony?
Yes, thank you. It looks like we have 6 people signed up. I will call your name and unmute you in the order that has signed up thus far on the Google Sheet. Once we're done with that list, we'll ask other folks joined if there's additional testimony. So first we have Ali Ryan. Please accept the request to unmute.
Hello.
I should say you have 3 minutes and I'll be timing.
Okay. Before you start my 3 minutes, do I have the opportunity to submit written testimony in case I'm not able to say everything?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I haven't timed myself this morning, but okay, here I go. Hello, my name is Ali Ryan, and I am a Lower East Side resident who has attended many events at the old amphitheater. Today, I am testifying against the proposed East River Park amphitheater design and request that the proposal be tabled pending true public input from the people who actually go to the park. The design makes assumptions that the community wants casual small gatherings, which is not necessarily true and actually misses an opportunity to create a real amphitheater that currently does not exist in Lower Manhattan, that takes post-COVID needs such as outdoor events into consideration. The proposed East River Park amphitheater design is an absolute travesty of what the East River Park amphitheater and the surrounding trees were prior to being demolished in December 2021. The original structure was designed to house a recreation center and an amphitheater. It was the original home of the public theater, and Jane Jacobs fondly mentioned the East River Park amphitheater as an excellent destination for residents to come together according to her seminal book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, published in 1962. Now, I'd like to discuss the seating. The grassy tiers are not designed for low maintenance, and I disagree that the grassy tiers provide as much seating as the destroyed seating of the old amphitheater. There are 2 gardeners assigned to City Council 2 The gardeners are responsible for all of the parks, playgrounds, public pools, recreational centers, including East River Park. As I have witnessed in Tompkins Square Park, and it is documented in a local online news source, EV Grieve, the Parks Department has not maintained the grassy knoll in Tompkins Square Park, and presently there is a worn path in what used to be grass. One of the gardeners explained that he has not been gardening in Tompkins Square Park or doing his regular or the other parks because he has been sent to specific green spaces to garden in preparation for senior government official press conferences or photo ops. So I believe it is safe to assume that the grass design for the amphitheater seating will probably not be maintained. I also want to say that the moving the current structure closer to the Esplanade actually loses the second gathering area of the old renovated amphitheater. Local DJs such as DJ Curly Girl hosted dance parties in the behind the stage area. The current design loses that
Sorry to
space.
interrupt, 3 minutes. Please wrap up your testimony.
In closing, I ask the commission to table the design for East River Park Amphitheater until you can get real public input from the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mirna Casera. Please accept the request to unmute.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Good day. I'm Myrna Cáceres and oppose the new amphitheater plan in favor of rebuilding the 2001 design. In a city where never-ending constructions of new buildings resulting in less air circulation, more pollution, squeezing buildings in every inch resulting in more overcrowding, natural scenic views at the East River Park is even more essential. Prior to destruction, East River Park was an oasis, escape from city life, especially for Lower East Side, low-income families of all backgrounds. The amphitheater had well-planned areas to left and right of the theater, designated areas where those not attending an event could still enjoy a relaxing day, sitting on the grass by a tranquil river view, watching the boats go by, whether solo, meeting with family, friends for a picnic, enjoying the peaceful view. Sitting at the amphitheater bench, whether or not a show was on, everyone still enjoyed a beautiful scenic river view. Suggested plan will take it all away. Focal point will be enormous, giant canopy, ground level. No matter where you sit, stand, walk, that is the focus, blocking essential peaceful scenery from all angles, adding the very thing going to the East River Park to escape from. Even from a boat view looking towards the park, you will see greenery. The new lawn design is not seeing impaired or kids running, playing friendly. Central Park is huge, plenty of space for large entertainment. East River Park is not. It is for the community, not commercial. Narrow Park, one side by the river, the other by congested, toxic FDR drive traffic. Shared space is limited by the cleaner air riverside of that area. Not a coincidence. Yesterday was 9/11. 21 years ago, the 2001 elevated amphitheater stage was rehabilitated in only 6 days, 24/7, loved by 500 volunteer professionals, donated supplies for the amphitheater, benches, and soccer field, dedicated to the children who were affected by the 9/11 attacks. This labor of love, which should have been preserved, needs to be rebuilt, especially with even more lives lost post 9/11 related illnesses. Never forget. The 2001 amphitheater design best serves the community, the priority, not developers. Please choose people first. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Todd Fine. Please accept the request to unmute and begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Yes. Hi, my name is Todd Fine. I'm the president of the Washington Street Advocacy Group, which advocates for public art and good design in New York City. And I think I also want to say this should have never been on the consent agenda. It's obviously one of the most controversial issues in the city right now, and I'm glad there's a public hearing. But we'll start with just at first glance of this design. This is part of the gentrification mission of the Lower East Side. This is an ostentatious structure that's not focused on form, that's designed to turn the entire East River Park into something more like the Hudson River Park. And it's using the Hudson River Park playbook, focusing on aesthetics, in fact, even using the same landscape designers in a sort of luxury space that is bordering what is a poor, low-income neighborhood. And it's announcing to the world, to the real estate industry, that this entire park is going to be a basis for high-rise construction and that all the current residents are going to be displaced and gentrified. And it's clear that it's not focused on form based on the design. It mentions weather, but there are huge gaps in the structure, which means that performances, costumes, sound will be damaged by rain that goes through those gaps. What's the purpose of that? They say it's to be a grand announcement of arrival, but who are you announcing to? You're announcing to basically advertisements for luxury real estate, that this is a luxury area, that this is the new New York, that this is a new East River Park geared toward a new class of people that will live there. That's what is being announced here. And that's also shown by the landscaping when it's meandering curves and not really practical seating, not the utilitarian Moses design, but a design that is supposed to show kind of a luxury, what's the term, kind of a trivial existence rather than a serious focus on function. And that's really important when we're considering the money that's being spent here. $1 billion park project, $5 million on this ostentatious design, when there are massive needs for affordable housing, when there's massive needs for just the basic sporting activities and other things in the park. They talk about the acoustics, but how could there be good acoustics with a design that's broken up? Acoustics should focus on a point. They say there's acoustic studies. Why aren't those studies presented? If you really wanted to focus on form, you would have more seating, a design that was, where the acoustics center on a particular point, and you would not have a structure that was just, playful and wasteful. And it really is emblematic of what New York City has become. And it's going to announce to the world, to the real estate industry, that the Lower East Side is dead and on its way out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next signed up, I have Alice O'Malley. Please accept the request to unmute.
Hi. Hi. Turn the video on too. I'm Alice O'Malley.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Longtime resident of the Lower East Side and friend of East River Park, and been to many events at the former amphitheater. So I'm actually reading a statement from Emily Johnson, which is I'm just going to read it straight. The surrounding site of Corlear's Hook and the proposed new amphitheater is the area of a 1643 massacre of Lenape people. According to city and state archives, due diligence and geolocation has not been completed. The project must halt until proper collaboration with Lenape Nation and geolocation is done. So basically this amp is going to be on the site, a sacred site of the Lenape people, which needs to be addressed. That's it.
Thank you very much. Next signed up, we have Harriet Hirschstorm. Please accept the request to unmute. Thank you. You have 3 minutes. You can turn your video on if you'd like.
Okay, I'm not going to because then I'll lose the audio. Yeah, I guess I just want to say that there is something pretty surreal about having this conversation right now about the new amphitheater, just because of the massive amount of destruction that's occurred. Over 700 trees have been killed. And if this doesn't give you pause, it really should. You need to think about why that doesn't bother you. And I guess the other thing I want to say is that in your renderings, you have these little paper trees and little drawings of trees. But right now, the area that you're talking about is a literal wasteland. It's just, there's nothing there. And there used to be 700 trees, and there used to be people who had access to the waterfront and would sit under those trees. As I guess Ms. Caceres has already said, it was a paradise, and now it's a wasteland. And so I just want to let you know that in some ways, looking at your amphitheater design, there's something surreal and a little offensive about trying to imagine anything in the space that's been so completely destroyed.
Thank you. Next, we have Billy Cohen. Please accept the request to unmute, and you may begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. I don't know why the video won't come on. Okay. What everybody has said and historically is so important, but we need a stage. We don't need people. There was a real stage, real performances, and it was a very important part of the Lower East Side, as everybody said, in the park. We need a real stage. We don't need people wandering in and out from the stage. And we need real seating for real performances. They showed the precedent images of 1,000 people attending performances, and I don't know how many, it doesn't say how many seats these are, and it doesn't look like proper seating like everyone has said. So we really need a stage. We really need proper seating. We understand the curving and the grading is ADA accessible, which is very important, but that doesn't preclude also real seating. And because there are no more trees there, and there won't be any mature trees in our lifetime to provide shade, we really need a separate shade structure. So give us a proper amphitheater that's not so ostentatious and overwhelming the landscape. Give us a real stage that stays dry, that has power, that the community can put on performances. They used to put on, I think the first Shakespeare performance was put on there. And there won't be any mature trees in our lifetime. And there's been the East River Park Action has taken temperatures. It's going to be incredibly hot throughout the park, like in the hundreds and dangerous temperatures. We need shade structures. So give us a real theater and give us separate shade structures throughout the park, or people won't be able to use it. It's just going to be too hot for anything. And I know this is just a design. It's not talking about what power will be provided, electricity. Is this a lost opportunity for solar panels and battery storage? It's really quite ostentatious, and it's not a stage. We need an amphitheater. There's a word theater included in there. And again, yes, the sound, everything, all these other points are so important. So please provide shading throughout. And I don't know if anybody, this again, not part of designs, but are there going to be water fountains or drinking fountains? And it's everything everyone said. Please give us a theater. Please give us shade. We need mitigation for losing 700, 800 trees. There will be 900 gone before the end. And this has to be considered as part of the landscape, part of how people will use the park. And I guess eventually they're counting on shade from high rises, but right now we were going to need shade structures, and you can't count on mature trees for years. And if they don't provide irrigation and give more maintenance to Parks Department to maintain and have these new trees go, it won't even be a real park without trees. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Daniel Tano. Please accept the request to unmute.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
You have 3 minutes.
I'm Daniel Tano. I'm a resident of the Lower East Side and a regular park user of East River Park. I'm also a member of Community Board 3, and I've worked in this park as a nonprofit steward, as well as a Parks Department employee. I do not represent on this call the community board or the nonprofit or the city Parks Department, but I do want to represent the things I've heard on the community board from the community that, as well as from seeing people use this space in the park about this new structure. I, for one, like this design, but I've learned in the past 17 years of using this park that my perspective as a waterfront advocate use of parks and is not always what the community wants. So I wanted to relay what I've heard from the community. And that the biggest things about the design of this structure in particular are the lack of a backstage. I like that it's close to the water and fits in with the waterfront design, but artists that have testified at the community board and has not been incorporated into this design say that there's a need for a backstage. Also the solar and use of electricity for the artists that are using this stage during like more informal events and a way to secure that energy, that electricity, especially if it's solar and battery backup. And then the last thing that is not incorporated in this design that I've seen and heard from the community is a space facing the water where some of the epic dance parties that happen here informally, the people that use the park want to use the waterfront as well for those, and this design does not incorporate that. So I think this should be tabled until the community input on this design is fully represented in the design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It looks like that concludes those who have signed up via our Google form to testify. Oh, I see Tommy Loeb. Please accept the request to unmute. And if you wish to testify, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm a 45-year resident across the street from the park and a frequent user, and have attended many events myself in the park prior to the destruction of the amphitheater. I was here for Sandy. The amphitheater recovered the next day. We never understood the need to totally replace it, but now that we're there, I want the Design Commission to understand that this is a NORC community. I don't know if you understand what that or know what that means. That means it's a naturally occurring retirement community. We have the highest representation of people over the 65 age category, probably in the entire city. If you look at the way the design of the whole amphitheater, which includes the canopy now and the stage area, which I hope you're able to think about now, it does not allow the elderly in this community to have appropriate access and seating for performances. The whole front of the stage area, which would probably be used for smaller performances, has no seating at all. Then further back, you have very limited seating, and I'm still not sure of how that seating works. Does it have backs? Is it comfortable? And then we have a huge lawn area, which also is totally unusable for the majority of seniors who live in this community. They're not going to be able to get down on a blanket. They're not going to be able to stretch out on the lawn. And then we have the last feature, which people have raised also, and that's maintenance. We now have a totally burnt lawn, which was planted by the city as mitigation during ESCR, where the compost area was. The city spent a huge amount of money putting a lawn in less than 8 months ago, and now it is totally burnt, unusable. And I believe that's what's going to happen here. As people have pointed out, we are getting and maybe they can clarify, but we've been told we're getting 3.5-inch trees as replacement for what we had. If that's not true, please tell me. But we know how long it's going to take before we actually get shade on that lawn. So what's going to happen, as people said, we recently took the temperature out there on hot days. It was 129 degrees in the sun. There is no shade. So what does the design commission's responsibility is? And I heard you say it before for the previous item, that you have a responsibility to the streetscape and the people of New York. Well, this is an opportunity for you to show.
Interrupt, 3 minutes. Please complete your testimony.
Sure, one more thing. This is an opportunity for you to show that you're just not going to rubber stamp a design that's presented to you without fully hearing and understanding what it means to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see Chris Ryan has their hand raised to testify. Please accept the request to unmute.
Hello.
You have 3 minutes.
The camera, I'm going to turn on the camera. Okay, can you see me?
Yes, I've requested the option for you to start your video if you'd like. Okay. Yep, there you go.
Hello. Hi, I'm Chris Ryan. I was asked to give some input because I have thrown a lot of concerts and events on the Tompkins Square former band shell. We lost the band shell there completely, so now it's just a vacant pit. And to give some insight, it's a struggle there with electricity. People have had to make these custom boxes just to even get power from a lamp post. And there's a bit of a hierarchy and a power structure as to who has a box to even get power to break out from these sources. And that makes it very unfair for people. I mean, they try not to be unfair, but there's inherently, so there's power issues. The original design of the band shell amphitheater in East River Park, if you go back in history, which I encourage you to do, it had a structure behind it that was actually a backstage, and there was tunnels underneath. So you could actually do a very elaborate production there, hence the Shakespeare in the Park starting there. I would encourage going big. We're going to spend $1 billion. Let's have a structure where people can come up from the bottom of the stage, or technicians can get under the stage and run power and have a very professional thing. What I see is just a minimalist garbage design that looks good, but probably doesn't sound good. We got to get real sound engineers in there. If you've ever been to Greece and you go to those ancient amphitheaters, a little thing they do sometimes, they'll have someone stand on stage and whisper, and they put you in the back row and you can just listen and you hear what they're saying. So they didn't have amplification back then, but they put on these massive shows to large audiences, and we should be replicating that acoustical design. We should be going. So if we don't have amplified sound, you don't even need it. And the seating, I agree, it looks like very random and not comfortable, and we should have seating, improve the seating, have backs for and access for seniors, as they said. It looks like they just want to have random patches of seating. If you look at the most recent big event there, I think it would qualify, would be the doggy parade at Halloween. And it was filled. It looked like a concert. Every seat was filled. So just to randomly put people in the unstructured rows and just think like, oh, this Seussian design is like not good if we're going to really serve a great public. And so that was my main things: acoustics, power, accessibility, and yeah, that's my main thing. And think about load in and stuff like that. You know, we do shows on Tompkins Square Park. We have to drive a vehicle down, and one good thing about the old system was, yeah, as I mentioned, the back behind the thing, people had those dance parties on the water. So we need backstage and an ability for people to have parties behind the amphitheater. And again, go big, go home. Let's think about lights. Let's think about solar power. Like, let's think forward. Okay, thank you for the time. I mean, let's do better than they did in 1920s when this thing first went up. Let's not do worse.
Thank you.
Got it.
Next, I see Fanny IP with their hand raised. Please accept the request to unmute.
Yes,
You have
hi.
3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Fanny Epp, and I've been a
40-year resident of the Lower East Side, and I've attended many performances. I've attended many performances and shows at the amphitheater. And the biggest issue that I have with this structure is the one side that's open, like through all those slats and everything. I mean, you know, I don't understand like what's gonna happen to a production when there's rain, you know, or big wind. So we get a big gust of wind. I mean, all of that production and stage is going to be gone. I don't understand, you know, why do you have that one side open? I mean, if it's for acoustic purposes, I mean, the sound's going to escape through the open slabs over there. The other issue I want to mention is it's not a pavilion. It's an amphitheater first, and it's not a pavilion. It's an amphitheater. And also I want to agree with everyone else, what everyone else have said in regards to the seating and also a backstage. A lot of people use that backstage for other reasons, such as where performers hang out, where they socialize. And, you know, there were many dance parties for years that happened. So we definitely need a bigger backstage. Yep, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see Tonto Cabrera with your hand raised. Please accept the request to unmute.
Yes, my name is Santo Cabrera.
Okay,
my name is Santo Cabrera. I've been living in Lower East Side for a long time. I'm part of the DJ groups that does the music there for years. We have more than 200 people that come to the music over there every single weekend. It's everybody's park. Our park that's our park. The park was built for diversity, for the parks to not to be together with everybody else, so we don't have no shootings together, no arguments. Thing is, we need our park back there by the waterfront that we don't have place to do now. I don't know how we're gonna do the DJ groups and everything like that, but we have a lot of people doing DJs back there, but we need our space back there to enjoy our life and for other people to enjoy their life when they're not there for the week and the weekends. We use that park in the wintertime, we use that park in the springtime, we use that park every single day. It's not like with the people that when they did the survey who using the park, they says no, the park was dead. But the park was never dead. We always use the park. And my name is Tonto Cabrera, lived here for years and years and years, just supporting the DJ groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised. One other person's joining, one moment. Is there anyone currently on Zoom who I have not yet called on to testify who would like to speak? Please either use the raise your hand feature in Zoom or physically raise your hand on video. Okay, I believe that concludes the testimony for today.
Thank you, everybody, for your testimony.
There were a lot of things said that are very important for us to know about and consider. We are focused on the amphitheater structure because the park has previously been approved, but there were a lot of comments about the amphitheater structure. And commissioners, we can make comments and give direction that probably be helpful to the design team, or we could suggest, I suppose, a subcommittee meeting to consider them, but people should voice their opinions and we'll decide how to proceed.
And just because Lori Hawkinson, our architect commissioner, had to leave early, I just wanted to convey her thoughts. She likes the design of the amphitheater, had several questions related to acoustics, and got answers accordingly from the team, but she just wanted me to reiterate that here in her absence, but encourages the team to also talk through some of the issues that were brought up.
Yes. Yeah, hi. I want to be clear as it can be. Is our jurisdiction the amphitheater, the structure, the new structure? Is it about the relationship of the new structure to the functions? I mean, I had to ask Deborah, now this may be my fault. I immediately thought, wait a minute, what's the seating like? Where is it? Also, it seems that the focus and of the presentation, I say very respectfully, had to do with the innovation, the structure of the new arches. But thinking about the functioning here, I wondered, wait a minute, how is this going to work? I immediately thought about acoustics. I thought about how people sit or and hear and listen to the events. I mean, sitting, it was hard. It's hard for me to tell, at least, will there be sort of folding chairs established for different events at different level? How will it work? There are a number of questions, and of course, it's not our purview, but who is funding all of this? And will the Parks Department be maintaining all of it? And a big thing is, if it is at all accurate, we need a lot of trees. I mean, you need trees no matter what. And the question of even beginning to enjoy the space and a performance, which could begin at 5 o'clock. I mean, you do need shade, you do need the aesthetics of it, and for the park space to be working. So I'm a little bit unclear. I commend trying to do something of a design interest with the structure of the amphitheater. I'm not completely sure that it works as well as it might for the functions that are projected for the space. I say respectfully to the designers.
So, I'm sorry, Mary, were you about to speak? I had several questions that I have about the utility portion of the amphitheater, because this park seems to have been, via the testimony of many of the people, being used not just through the front way, but the back of the theater. If this design is to celebrate those performances for the city, I think that's something that really needs to be looked into. But also the utilitarian and electrical outlets. I understand that the parks gives people certain there are steps that you do for permits, et cetera, but how functionable will this be if there's not enough for the weekly social gatherings that already are occurring? Now, the other question I had in terms of the design is that if anything is ever happening and spaces get blocked off from the back because they need a backstage, how will there be circulation for people who aren't participating or who aren't watching whatever's happening and they just want to walk through the park or around it? Like, how much space will there be for that if necessary, or even for vehicles that will bring in and out equipment or structures, temporary structures? Like, is there enough room for all those things to be adequately done? I'm also concerned about the utility, the electricity, movement of vehicles, et cetera. And just in terms of lighting, I understand there's stadium style lighting. If it's possible, I would like to see studies of lighting at night, all of that, and what the sun would be like in terms of the space, how for the audience and also for people who are participating and using the space. I also do feel for the seniors in this neighborhood. I understand that is true. I know that area has a lot of senior living housing, and it would be useful and helpful if there was some sort of handicap zone or seating for the elderly if they wanted to participate or listen to whatever's happening there.
So the team want to respond to
Let's go point by point and going maybe backwards. We want to address the accessibility in the seniors, the seating area.
Yeah, I think,
Or
Aaron, if
Aaron.
you wanted to address that.
Right, I can address that. Yeah, as you pointed out,
Right here.
switch back to the program. Today's presentation was focused primarily on the structure itself. I feel like maybe this is auto advancing. I apologize if that's happening. But as part of the original amphitheater design that we proposed in 2019 and was approved in 2019, there's an accessible seating area here, which you can access. Okay, you can access from the Esplanade here, and you can sit anywhere in here. These little indents here are actually meant to be accessible seating for wheelchairs. So you can back up a wheelchair into those nooks and actually have your shoulders in line with the person next to you, rather than being forward of the person next to you or not in line with, you know, your friends who came with. We have a second accessible seating area up at the top, which is here. And the idea there was that for a large event where you would, you know, want to sit either maybe in the front or further back, and there's a large crowd filling the space, we wanted to give people various options, not just one option as to where accessible seating would be. Yeah, so anywhere that you see, we do have a diagram in, you know, the full presentation that we usually go over when we're talking about seating that calls us out better. But anywhere that you see these sort of nooks, that's a accessible space for a wheelchair. And then anywhere that you see a double row of seating, that's seating with.
That's what?
It's seating with backs. So here, if you look at the model, you can see that you could sit on this first row and lean back against the second row, therefore providing some back seating for people to be able to use the amphitheater that way. So there's a variety of different types of seating in the amphitheater. Anywhere that we're providing accessibility through these paths, we're made sure to have the seats be shallow enough that they would be comfortable for elderly people to be able to sit and lean back comfortably. Anywhere that it's more this lawn seating, we provided a deeper seat, which provides a little bit of flexibility. You could set up, you know, a little lawn chair on there, or you can, you know, sit and stretch your feet out and lean back. So there's a variety of different seating options in the amphitheater.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, this is Grace. I'm the Senior Director of Design Commission, that when this was approved in 2019, that was one of the requests from the commission, that there is accessible and companion seating, and the team was responsive when we approved it. So that was all integrated into this park design, and that's why today we're just reviewing the amphitheater.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Are you guys continuing with?
Yeah, I think we should go point by point. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. Matt is going to cover the programming and the arch design.
Yeah, I'll talk about a few things at the same time to give a little bit more background in the thinking. So this is probably a good image to talk about. And the point well taken about the question of whether or not this performs acoustically, because we have this open face. And so when we worked with our acoustic engineers, it was important for us to identify the surfaces that would actually reflect sound. I'll go to this section. And these arches here, which happen right at the top of the structure, perform the best in terms of reflecting the sound, this kind of zone. So we felt that it was important to, let's say, make a slight compromise in the overall performance of the acoustics in order to make sure that there's a high degree of openness and that this feels like it's a part of the park. So it was really kind of a balance of priorities, because we heard from the working group and the community that it was very important that this worked well and for small events and kind of everyday events, And that's really where we embrace the idea of doing something that really felt as much about the water as it did the performance stage area. We were concerned about creating something that was, let's say, large and heavy and only addressed the performance area and turns its back on the water. And so one of the ways that we make sure that it's not turning its back on the water is creating these kind of open fingers.
May I just ask to understand that if something's going on that is a performance or say whatever of whatever kind, above all, it has to have function in terms of the job that the performers are doing, and it has to be heard.
Yeah.
So that you need sound. Will there be electronic sound? Will there be permanent loudspeakers? Can this work? I'm not saying that we need to know all of it.
Yes.
Now, that's not our purview, but it just seems at least questionable as to, okay, how is this working at this part of the park during whatever season for a variety of events to be workable by many different acceptable criteria.
Right.
It's hard, at least for this person, devoted member of many audiences, to be confident and to understand without destroying the park and respecting it and enhancing it with a focus of performance, but also making the park something for now and the future with performance as well as all year round.
And I think maybe to add to that, and we'll segue into
Maybe
some of the basic assumptions about what was in and out of the project.
Thinking about it.
But I think we should review some of the design criteria, but I turned to this slide because I think it's really important to look at the basic assumption that we had moving into the design about how large events would be accommodated here. And here you can see on the left is that our assumption is that the setup would be similar to what happened in the near past when structure existed, is that for large events like Summer Stage, all of the rigging and stage equipment would be brought in on a temporary basis. And so that's how it happened in the past, and that's how we were proposing in the future. And what that does then is that it frees the structure itself from being this kind of, let's say, large vessel that's designed to operate well 5-6 times a year, but it's something that's designed to operate more than 350 days of the year when you don't have a large event. And so that's why our design eye went toward looking at these smaller events and how can we make this structure feel right in the landscape, and it can work for smaller events and non-events for that matter, because we know that people use this space in a very, very informal way. And so that might be helpful to segue into some of the basic assumptions from the city on that.
Okay, yeah, adding to what Matt and Aaron. So again, this, I want to encourage everybody to take a step back and look at this from a bird's eye view for a moment, from a design criteria and direction standpoint. Maybe one of the top 2 or 3 feedback and requests that we received from the community that was unanimous was to provide a structure over this amphitheater, outdoor amphitheater, and also enhanced and better seating and accessible seating. Beyond that, going down to the micro level details, we've heard from various layers and groups of the community, and each group has a different need or different request, different experience. So this is us trying to figure out the happy medium of the various wide range of uses and the user groups that use this park, this amphitheater, as well as the funding, as well as the maintenance, as well as the history, the aesthetic, the acoustics, and that for the community, the buildings that are across the highway. And so there were one layer after another that sort of piled on each other and became the direction for this project. And the result that you're seeing today is really honestly the happy medium that we try to check every single box possible with our design team. I maybe lost sight, but there's there was a question about power, that the stage has power. We heard that from the community and that got incorporated. I think the accessibility, the seating, functionality of the arches, we did discuss all that. Unless we missed anything, should we go back to the commissioners?
Yes, please go ahead.
So just a few questions. Let's start with, we're talking here about this, right? That's been approved.
Right.
I just want to get that out there. This, for what you are saying to us, the scoping that was done by the agencies, the budgeting, and then the input that you got from the community suggested that this should be primarily functioning for small gatherings. Is that correct?
Actually, no, a wide variety and different scales of events.
Right.
Smaller one-off or smaller grassroots performers all the way up to summer stages and larger events.
So what I'm saying is that the infrastructure as it exists for this, you just said that it has power, correct?
Right.
Right. So for a small event, you could use power. There is power here for that. Because we heard from the public testimony that there was a desire to do that. For larger events like the summer stage one that you showed an image for, there would need to be additional equipment and power brought in. Is that correct?
I think Parks Department can speak to, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, my name's Melissa. Is this on?
Yeah, it's not amplified, but the same thing.
Okay. Okay. My name is Melissa Haldeman with New York City Parks. So responding to your question about the size of events. So the city is very happy to provide this amphitheater structure to the community. It was an additional ask as this was not funded as part of the ESCR project. So to clarify the amphitheater design that was part of the Eastside Coastal Resiliency design that was previously approved, the amphitheater followed on a separate track. We were able to have 3 workshops with the community. We met with the community board several times. As part of the scoping, our design team also worked with historical data on how groups use the space. They worked with we worked with our special events permits department to run information on, I believe it was 2 years of events. The size of the intended audience for the permits, the groups that were using the space. And so we found that as our consultant Matt indicated, there are a few times a year where we have large summer stage events that bring in their own specialized equipment. But the large percentage of the events were small to medium sized events. We also wanted to make space for informal, unpermitted events, sort of pop up, people playing music or using the space recreationally. So in addressing the space as a way that would meet the needs of the community, our design intent in working with the team was to create a space that would accommodate everything from that casual, someone playing a guitar or someone enjoying the space on a small scale, all the way up to a summer stage type event.
So are you saying that the demolition that we heard testimony about was part of the East Side Coastal Resilience effort, and that this construction is now a separate effort to return to the community that which was lost in order to render this site more resilient? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So yes, the site is already being demolished under the Eastside Coastal Resiliency Project. The amphitheater structure was not part of the initial scope of the project. It is added scope to return this, structure that's important to the community historically, to return it in a new form to the park while also honoring the way it has been used in the past.
Okay, great. Because I think it's really important that the public understand that this demolition did not occur to create this new pavilion, right? That's very important to understand.
Yes, and just to add on, the reconstruction of East River Park will elevate the entire park to a design flood elevation of 16.5 feet.
And therefore
the entire park is being reconstructed. So that is why the entire area is being reconstructed, because it's being elevated at a higher.
Okay, great. So then what you've just said, then the primary feedback from the community regarding this amphitheater was that it should function on a day-to-day basis for small to mid-sized events. And for very large events that would require a great deal of additional equipment, that would have to be brought in because that's not the primary demand of the community. So it's your position that this is responsive to that request. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, great. And it has electricity that's adequate for that. Okay.
There's an electrical panel built into the side of the stage so that small events have access to power. That was also part of the design of the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. So that was already incorporated before the canopy was added. That was a very big request from the community to have access to power.
Okay, so now that we have established that there is power, I want to address two other questions that we heard from the community. One is even for small to mid-sized events, we heard from a number of the members of the public that there would be a need for a backstage area. And I wonder if you could answer the question of why there isn't such an area in this design.
So I'll start to answer that and I'll pass it to Aaron. Just a reminder too that the scope of this particular project is looking at immediately adding a structure to this stage. So the basic site plan and the amphitheater design minus the actual structure was already pre-approved without a backstage area.
I kind of understand you and I kind of don't, because to me, a backstage area would be part of the amphitheater and not part of the landscape.
Right.
It seems like you said in the beginning that it used to be quite a distance away from the
Yes.
promenade, but now it's moved much closer to the promenade. And so the dance parties, like quite a few people, including you were
Right.
talking about, backed up to that promenade, and now it's too small for them to have the dance party there. Is that correct?
You could maybe just look at it quickly.
Yeah, we'll go to the existing and then the
Pre-existing.
pre-existing.
Yeah, so this is, I think, the area that people were speaking about. Yeah.
So this is the area where the building used to exist.
So I guess then I'll put the question a different way. Is there a way to accommodate, like as Karen pointed out, now we heard from many people that the community gatherings and the dance parties were something that was very important to people. And also that for performances, even for small to mid-sized performances, there's a desire for some kind of backstage area, maybe for a mobilization for the performances. So I'm just wondering, in the context of this footprint or this area here, I know the landscape has been approved. Is there a way to adjust the design in such a way that could meet that request from the public?
We'll have to take that back and revisit that. There is also underground utilities and the flood protection underground that the base of the arches, you can speak to this better than I can, but the base of the arches had to be coordinated with our construction team to make sure they're not conflicting, and we're able to actually construct that with the whole system that's beneath the stage underground.
Yeah.
So there's a little more intricate study that needs to be done for that.
Just in terms of the use for events, sort of separate from the backstage question, because there's sort of two questions. I just wanted to sort of reiterate that an element of the original design, even before we were looking at adding the canopy, was to make sure that it was a space that was more flexible and more usable for different types of events. So the way, and this is, if you want to flip to the next one.
Yeah.
The way that it sort of opens up towards the esplanade as well as towards the amphitheater is by design to provide a little bit of flexibility in terms of, which direction do you want to face the event, and where do you want to set up within that in terms of, if you're having a dance event, you could set up on the stage itself and use the area under the canopy as your space for dancing, rather than having the amphitheater empty when it's not being used for a formal event and only the esplanade side being usable for, less formal community event. The idea was sort of to integrate it all together and bring it closer to the esplanade. By bringing it closer to the esplanade, we do sort of lose some of that space between the esplanade and the amphitheater as well. So there's that trade-off there.
Right.
I'm
sorry, one last question. I hear you on that, but there still is a great deal of space here. And while I agree with you that you could have a party within here, what we heard from the public was that people really enjoyed and loved this waterfront space as a space of gathering. So I guess I would just request that perhaps you could look at, I know this path is new, right? That was not approved in the 2019 approval. So there is some perhaps opportunity to look at this space here, even if this remains with the same footprint. Is there not?
Well, that makes sense. And as you said, I think that that is something that we would have to take back and look at more,
Okay,
looking
great.
at all of the other
Thank you.
site constraints that come into play.
I'm sorry, I believe there was also coming here.
Mary, I think. even.
And
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, I wanted to mention that because for me, it's a little confusing. Yes, the front of the theater is accessible. In terms of, but then also the utilities or the electricity. If there is a DJ who wants to perform towards the other way, what is the accessibility of the electrical for those people? Like, let's say, for the bottom where that tree is right now and the steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that area.
And
Is there room to reconsider or to just have that be something that to look at and study, to have performances facing the other way? And then I did have a question before, which I don't know if it was answered or not. If something is happening in the front, and they need space in the back to, store things or to bring things on, how accessible is the pathway to people who are not participating in that show? Like, is there still, like, I guess, walkable behind the stage for just regular people who are not maybe part of whatever the sets are who are performing? Is that, I would like to know if that's going to be considered in terms of.
you mean here?
Yeah. As well.
Yeah.
So that perhaps then a small DJ or someone who would just pop up may not need to register for a permit. They could just bring, you know what I mean? Because if that would also lend itself to the question of equity and accessibility to the parks, or just anyone who wants to participate and not maybe perhaps do a giant party in the amphitheater, but might want to have a small get together, in the park.
Right. Yeah, and I think to echo what we were saying before, I think all of those things are related to if we can make a more backstage space here, and then ensure that there's always free circulation along the waterfront. I don't want to speak for the city, but our position would be that if there's an event here, you would want to keep the waterfront as open as possible. It is the Esplanade. So ensuring that those operations work within the space itself. Yeah.
Just one last thing that I know. I'm rereading the comments from the commissioners previously, the feedback, and then the clarification of what you have done. The questions came from Lori, Mary, Deborah, and Kenseth. And so as I read this, and it's getting late, at least for me, so I leave, but as I read the responses, it's difficult, at least for me, to understand in those responses the relevance and the connection with some of the questions and with this structure here. I now, and I mean this, I say it with respect, I see what has happened to the arch. I admire it, but I see it as a structure of some kind of art, of something that is interesting and worthwhile, but in my view, creates many more questions of the use of the space, of the functions, of how the backstage works, how the seating works. It becomes, I don't see that the answers here, as you put it, though very important, and I think you're grappling with it. I'm not sure that what you're doing is you're showing to us just these points that were asked, such as in terms of the materials, what the Parks Department is requiring, that electrical boxes are integrated into the amphitheater stage wall. I mean, that in fact, does that particular item relates to a lot of the questions people ask. What do you do if it's a smaller group? How do you amplify and so on? So, I mean, this is a great project because it should be, in fact, renewed, returned, be the place for the community and the public that it was always meant to be, but for the 21st century and for the many functions. I'm totally supportive of it, and I admit to being a little bit confused and concerned about the implementation, with all great respect.
I just wanted to clarify one point just publicly, that we met one-on-one with commissioners. There has been no meeting prior to this, just in case somebody thought about that.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we can, this is here for preliminary, correct? There obviously been a good number of concerns voiced by commissioners. But we will see you several times again. I think to summarize, even assuming, as we should, that our jurisdiction is limited to the area that is within the otherwise approved plan, and that we're really looking at structure above all, there are a significant number of elements that need to be, I think, clarified. We could maybe give preliminary approval with conditions, or which I think would probably be the best way. But those are significant conditions, right? There's still questions about the acoustics, and to show a diagram saying, well, we think the acoustics works may not be enough, because intuitively, and certainly among members of the community who spoke, it seems as though the acoustics may not work. So it'd be nice to have the acoustics settled by someone who's a specialized acoustician. Secondly, I think the area of the balance between where the performance is taking place and where performances and activities used to take place and the backstage could be worked on a great deal more without affecting, the rest of the plan. Maybe by providing, you did put in a new ramp. So there were, as was pointed out by the commissioners, there has been a change. Maybe there needs to be a little bit more attention to what's going on backstage and how that handles it. And maybe there has to be, at least for us, a discussion as to whether or not more space can be provided for the historical dance party activities that took place without compromising the integrity of the walk that exists on the back. And that doesn't, that could be the removal of those steps in some sense. It could be elimination of that smaller grassy. You guys are smart guys. We're not going to design this for you. Ethel said, I think we all agree, it's quite an inventive and in many ways compelling design. But it doesn't seem to have, at least as far as I can tell from what people have said, answered a number of serious questions for commissioners, let alone the community. And I think you have done a great deal of community outreach. I think that's great. But I think for the next level of approval, we'll need you to come back and have highly specific, clear answers, either changes or answers as to why things can't be changed. Is that okay with people?
Yes, yes, I think so.
Okay.
At least for me, it's good.
All right, so we'll take will be the conditions. Okay, you've heard them, you know them.
Do you mind if I quickly respond to?
I would love you to respond.
To the point of the acoustics, I just wanted to clarify that we've had acoustic engineers involved in it.
I have no doubt of it. We haven't seen it. That's all.
Sure, absolutely. So we'll come back with more clarification.
It just intuitively doesn't feel right. And you clearly haven't convinced the community that you've handled the acoustics issues.
Noted. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Grace, yeah, that's fine. I'm just getting the microphone. Okay.
Okay. Thank you all. And thank you very much for the excellent presentation, extraordinary attendance of our colleagues here. Thank you. Well, we're gonna take a vote. You have to stay, Ethel. You can't go. Okay, you can stand up. I'll now take a roll call vote on item 28230. When I call your name, please state your vote, and that vote, if for approval, will be for approval with the conditions noted. Laura is gone. Okay, Karen? Deborah?
I approve that with the conditions that we understand the acoustics better and that the team revisits the backstage to make sure that it accommodates the desire of the public to carry on its activities as it has prior to this new design.
Perfect. Manuel?
Approve with similar conditions.
Ethel?
Approve with the conditions as listed and outlined by the chair and other commissioners.
Mary?
Approve with those desired conditions.
Okay, I will vote in favor as well with those conditions. So we have unanimous approval to move the project forward and look forward to you coming back with answers to those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, once again for all of your testimony, those online, and commissioners for your feedback. We are now adjourning our meeting.
Thank you.